Want more positivity in your life? Subscribe, turn on notifications, follow us, and all that techie stuff. We'd love to hear from you. Comment, share, or give us a thumbs up. We are grateful to have you hanging out with us at Matt Logan Speaks.
So I have seen you spring into action in a lot of different ways, and one of the ways is that you saved some cows from the street. You remember that? I have Sheriff Scott Rose with me today.
Yes.
That's not. You didn't think that's what?
No, I didn't think that was. That's not what I expected at all.
You've been out to my place because there's been some unfortunate things, a fire and things. My daughter in the car crash, and we've crossed paths with some of that. But you didn't expect that intro, did you?
No. I'm thinking, where is he going to start?
Yeah,
cows.
Yeah,
that's funny.
So you remember I came across those cows, and I snapped you a picture, and I'm like, hey, there's cows in the road.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
we're a full service agency.
Absolutely, and I think that's why I wanted you to be here, because people they don't have any idea what you really do.
No,
and for me, I've seen it all. Like, I've seen you with the fire at my business. I've seen, and I don't mean you necessarily personally, but sheriffs and state troopers and police officers all over the place. I was actually first on the scene 10 years ago at that car crash up on Highway 30, where the guy ran the intersection. 5 people died. I found several of the people, unfortunately, in the ditch, and pointed them out to you guys. But I see you guys spring into those emergency situations all the time. But people don't understand, like, you just do everything for the community.
Right.
And really what people see, especially right now, is really there's bad cops.
Yep. Yeah. There.
And people are seeing that. And that's all they see then.
Yep. So if you look at the numbers, when they talk about, for example, when they talk about systemic racism, or that's kind of the narrative right now, where it's systemic racism in law enforcement on a nationwide level.
Yes.
Well, and they're basing that primarily on contacts with people of color.
Yep.
And if you look at the numbers, in the United States, you have between 800 and 900,000 cops.
Yep.
That have anywhere between 3.25 and 3.5 million contacts with people a year. And last year there were 9 unarmed African-American males that were shot by law enforcement.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers, I mean, every case like that's tragic. Obviously, there's a backstory to many of those cases as well.
Yeah.
But there are no numbers that support a systemic racism problem with law enforcement. It's just a political narrative, unfortunately, this year.
It is, and it's 2020 is an interesting year to say the least, and I think everybody, no matter what, like, quote unquote side of the aisle you're on, wants to get it over with.
Right, absolutely.
The election in a month, and everybody, I think they can breathe a little bit again, and things like that. But when the rubber meets the road is what you're kind of talking about, and that is where the reality is the reality. Okay, the reality is my daughter died in a car crash, but that doesn't mean my other 3 kids shouldn't drive.
Right. Exactly.
That's kind of the way it is. Bad things do happen, unfortunately, and there are bad people in the world. Let's just go right after those bad cops. What do you do in your position? What would you say? Somebody brings something to you, and hey, this X person abused his or her power. What do you do in a situation like that?
Well, typically,
as the leader,
excuse me. Typically, if we have somebody that wants to come in and file a complaint against an officer, the first thing we require them to do is to file a written complaint.
Yep.
And to be able to be available for questions, and we do a full investigation. It may be an internal investigation, depending on if it's a policy issue or if it's a legal issue. Then we will typically ask for an outside agency to help do an internal investigation on whatever the incident is. In 6 years of me being sheriff, we've never had a written complaint that we've had to deal with. Fortunately, we've got great people.
You do, yeah. I know several of them.
We have great people. But typically that's what's going to happen. You're going to have a written complaint that's required to be brought in to administration. Administration's going to want to talk to that person in person to go over the substance of that complaint, and then that'll go to whoever's in charge of investigations or whoever's in charge of supervising that department. If it's a policy or procedural issue, it'll go to the supervisor of that department, so a captain of patrol, and then he'll look at it and determine whether it's a talking to, whether it's an internal investigation, or whether it's an outside investigation. Same if it's a criminal matter, then it'll go to the captain of investigations, who typically always goes outside. So it's a non-partial outside investigation, and then you go from there. And then
so there's steps of accountability.
There's a ton of steps of accountability, and beyond that, let's say for example, if there's a criminal complaint filed against, if there's a criminal complaint actually filed against an officer, for example, like the officers in Minneapolis when those complaints were filed up there. For us, once a criminal complaint is filed, then you get sheriff's office admin, you get county admin, you get county HR involved, you get the state involved, Minnesota County's Insurance Trust or MCIT. They're going to be involved with their attorneys to review it and determine what the best course of action is to one, investigate whatever the criminal activity is, two, to see if it violates any policy or procedure within our office as far as our expectations of our officers, and then that investigation is done always by an outside agency, and typically not law enforcement. It's done by an investigative agency. I mean, there are so many steps that are taken in the event that you have any problems or issues like this. And that's just an example of what we do in more of a rural agency setting or a smaller agency setting. It's probably more, I'm sure it's more complex in some of the bigger agencies, metro agencies.
I think what a lot of people see is the initial narrative that wants to be shown. And then beyond that, nobody else wants to show what the truth is.
Right.
And which is why, it's one of the reasons why I do what I do. Right. Even the truth of my daughter's death and the car crash. You know how honest I am about that.
Yep.
And I think if we can come to a place of accountability for ourselves and accountability for those around us and help them be accountable is what I mean, we're going to actually be a better society for it. We're going to be a better person for it. And we're not going to jump to those conclusions when we hear a narrative. Why did we get so far away from that? And why some of the law enforcement agencies, why did they allow some of that narrative to happen in the past? I haven't seen it so much recently, even with yourself.
Right.
I think you've been a lot more I don't want to say defensive with it, but you certainly have gotten in front of this.
Absolutely.
And just you've shown what you do in the community. You've shown those things, very proactive now with it. But I don't feel like you were as proactive with it in the past. A little bit, not as much. And I don't mean that as a critical piece, but why is it that we've gotten so far behind that we'll only, as a society, listen to the one narrative?
I think sometimes sometimes it's easy to be complacent, especially if we're not having issues.
Sure.
We're in a community, in a county that is very supportive of law enforcement.
Yeah.
And in working to build that trust, we work very hard in being as transparent as possible with things that are going on with our agency. And a lot of times, if things are going well, a lot of times it's easy to kind of forget. We should remind people what our guys and gals are doing. Yeah. Where since
I want to pause you for a second. So I work with probably 300 to 400 of you guys every year. Right, in the different, I do anywhere from 40 to 50 schools every year. Yep. And 90% of those law enforcement are involved in some capacity, whether it be a mock crash or just there to support or whatever. So there's any event I go to, there can be 25 law enforcement. So I'm working with you guys all the time. And I see the compassion that you have for those communities and things like that. And that's easy to say in a rural community. I've been in some of the metropolitan communities, and I would say that they also have that compassion. how can you take that rural mentality and help people see in a metropolitan area what's really happening? Can you translate that? Is there a way to do that?
It's tough. I think it's tough in the bigger agencies that are chasing call after call after call. You have a situation like Minneapolis. I have friends who live in North Minneapolis who live literally blocks from where the Floyd incident took place. And they're folks that grew up in Kasson. I grew up in Kasson. And one of them I talked to shortly after this happened, we were talking about law enforcement support and law enforcement protection and coverage. And she explained that she's called in what she believes to have been, drug deals, people passing weapons, or people passing cash, or people driving issues in their neighborhood. Several things that we would normally report here that they would try and report up there, and they essentially were told if it's not a life or death situation, we don't have anybody available. And nobody came. And she has gotten that answer so many times that she doesn't even really think to call anymore, unless it's something so egregious that it's it's a life and death situation that she's concerned about.
Which there's a lot more murder in Minneapolis alone. Yep. I mean, there's a lot of different areas that the murder rates are way up. New York, Chicago is way up. I mean, it's hard to believe Chicago can be way up, but it's way up, and some of these other areas. But even in some of those cases, let me tell you a story. I get off of an airplane in Minneapolis, and there's have you been up there where they have the train that connects from Terminal 1 to Terminal 2?
Yep.
I had to go rent a car, so I had to go on the train or the tram or whatever to get to Terminal 2 to get to the rentals.
Yep.
And so I'm standing there waiting for the tram doors to open. All of a sudden, 4 police officers come running up to the train, and as the doors open, they run into it. And I get on, and I'm looking at them, and I could hear over one of the radios. The short version: there's a guy with a knife.
Yep.
And so they're telling everybody on the train that don't go down such and such, and I didn't even know where that was. So I'm like, that's not where I'm going. I didn't worry about it. And so they're getting into that, and so as we're riding the train over, I hear over the radio that they said this is a life and death situation. Well, so that made me think about it, and so I started looking at some of the murders that were happening and reading about them. A lot of times the police didn't even show up for those. Mm-hmm. Are they that scared?
Are you talking recent incidents
yes,
up in Minneapolis?
Yeah.
They're
like, well, they're going to wait for the smoke to clear and then come in.
There's also a lot of access issues too in some of those areas, especially once you get closer to the shop where Floyd was at. It's tough up there.
So why don't people see that? I flew into Minneapolis night 2 of the riots, and the city was on fire. Right. I could see it from the airplane.
Right.
How do people not see that? And I mean, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on.
Right.
Evil is evil.
Right. I agree.
I don't even know. I don't know if you're Republican or Democrat or Independent. I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea. I have not ever known for years. I don't care.
So one of the things that
you probably know the same thing about me. You have no idea.
One of the things I appreciate about the sheriff's elections in Minnesota is that there's 87 sheriffs, 87 counties.
Yep.
And we all run nonpartisan elections.
Okay.
So we don't pick a party. We don't run on party base. Most sheriff's offices in other states do. And I disagree.
That's good to know.
I disagree with that because I don't think there's any place for politics within law enforcement.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have agendas.
No.
We've got one agenda, and it's public safety.
Yeah.
And making sure people are safe. And I don't want politics to get in the way of that. That being said, some of the challenges in these metro areas that they've seen are certainly very political.
Yeah.
With when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, a lot of agencies have struggles. A lot of administrators struggle with some of the union representation that they get for their officers. I've been in a position, or in more than one position, where being a union member as an officer, I was protected from. I felt I was a good cop being protected from a not so good administrator. So I'm the good cop being protected by a bad administrator. However, they put just as much emphasis on protecting that bad cop from the good administrator. They're trying to give equal representation.
Okay.
The struggle that you see in some of these metro areas is some of the police unions are extremely strong and extremely powerful and influential in those areas, and also do campaign contributions.
I see.
One of the things that the sheriffs in Minnesota, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, which we're all part of, will not do political endorsements. Never have. It's just not something that the sheriffs do. The Chiefs Association does political endorsements, and they usually follow the union endorsements, which that's been kind of interesting.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a ton of pressure.
Wow.
But keep in mind, these police chiefs are at-will appointed employees, appointed by the mayor and city council, and they answer to the mayor and city council.
Yeah.
Where the 87 sheriffs in our state, they don't answer to anybody. They answer to the public. They're elected. They're an independent elected official, so they're not a county department. They're not a county employee. We're part of the county. We're the Dodge County Sheriff's Office, but I'm not a county employee. We're not a county department like your IT department or your county administration department or county highway department. We're an office. So, for example, when you hear somebody say, anytime you hear, did you know Sheriff Steve Burkhart from Olmsted County?
That name's really familiar.
He was sheriff. He was three sheriffs
ago. Yeah,
and just a great speaker, great friend, and very, very, very smart man. And I always got a kick out of him because anytime he'd hear anybody say Olmsted County Sheriff's Department, he would stop in his tracks. It didn't matter who he was talking to or how important his meeting was. He would stop and give you a Civics 101 lesson on the fact that a sheriff's office is an independent elected office run by an elected department head.
Yeah.
So it's an office, not a department. It's not a county department. It's an office or an agency. I should say an agency head, not a department head. Where a police department is a at-will appointed leader appointed by the
political party.
Right, the mayor and the city council.
Sure.
So they are a department of the city.
Sure.
Where I'm going with that is unfortunately, the city side tends to get way more political because you got a lot of chiefs who they're at-will employees and they're at the will of their mayor and city council and whatever their agenda or narrative is at any given time.
So that makes sense because thinking about it, there are more sheriffs that you see that speak out.
Absolutely more.
Than there are any city police officers or even state troopers.
Yep. And the accountability level is different too, I think. When you think about all these incidents that you see happening across the country, the few incidents that we do have, the percentage is, I forget the number, it's less than 0.001% of all law enforcement contacts nationwide end up being like a felony level a violation or a crime committed by that officer. So in other words, it's every type of career's got bad actors. You got bad attorneys. You got bad doctors.
Yep.
But if you look at law enforcement, and if you look at that 0.0001, I forget what the rest of the numbers are, percent of those 3.2 or 3.5 million contacts, if that's the percentage that you're seeing as the bad apples within this tree, I mean, some would argue we've got better numbers than clergy.
You do have better numbers.
I mean, when you think about it, really,
absolutely.
But the narrative is swung so the opposite direction. That any of these incidents that come up, the incident with Floyd up in the cities,
Floyd shouldn't have died.
No, absolutely.
It's certainly not in the fashion that it appears.
Absolutely
he did.
Not. No.
Yes, and I know that you think that way, but yeah, the truth has been coming out now. Right.
Yeah. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
Right. Absolutely.
And with the frustrating thing for cops with the Chauvin incident, aside from the fact that he had his knee on the guy's neck for 9 minutes.
Yeah.
However, what's coming out is that's not there's not a nexus there between that and his death.
Correct.
It had to do with his fentanyl.
Yes.
Now there's a duty a duty for us to take care of somebody who's overdosing on fentanyl as well.
Right. Well, so let's look at that. So I don't know the laws and things like that and how they would be interpreted, but someone that intended to murder somebody else is probably not going to call an ambulance.
Correct.
They called an ambulance for him.
Correct.
And so that to me was like, okay, well, that certainly shows intent to save him.
Right. Right.
It wasn't a malicious murder.
No.
So I don't know how people could even go there. Just with that little simple fact that was there.
Let's take it a step further.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not defending Officer Chauvin.
No,
there was
I'm
some
not
bad
either.
Stuff there.
Well, there's a kind of you look at his record of some
Right.
of the complaints that you
Right.
talk about, the written complaints.
Right.
That goes back a long ways.
So let's go back. If you look at his record, he worked there. I think he worked in Minneapolis 19 years, somewhere on just under 20 years.
Right.
And he had a number of complaints, citizen complaints.
Recollection is like there's like 15 or 16 confirmed
Right.
like serious
Use of force
complaints.
complaints.
Yeah.
So let's break it down a little. So this is a guy that's worked in Minneapolis and more of the high crime areas in Minneapolis his whole career.
Yeah.
The majority of people that he's dealing with are people in these high crime areas. The majority of the population in these high crime areas are people of color. So it would seem natural that if he's going to get complaints from people, it's going to be the people that he has the most contact with, which
For
in
sure.
that neighborhood or that area of Minneapolis, it's people of color. So just the fact that he's got 15 complaints from people of color of excessive use of force, does that mean he's racist?
Correct.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And so fast forward to this incident with Floyd. He had his knee on the guy's neck, and it was a bad scene.
Yeah.
But if you back up and look at it, this has been painted as this is racism. This is cops against the black man again.
Yeah.
And as bad as the whole scene is, there's nothing there that says or shows that Chauvin was racist,
Right.
or that he was motivated by any bias.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that a lot of these officers get in these bigger cities, especially Minneapolis, if you look at Minneapolis, you look at Chicago, you look at Seattle, you look at Portland, in some of their high crime areas, a lot of these guys who've worked in those areas for years and years and years, some struggle with they get hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just
totally.
It just they
like
start
callus.
to lose their filter.
Yeah.
It's just it just wears on you, and that cumulative stress of dealing with the kind of crime and stuff that they deal with up there on a day after day after day basis, that's going to wear on you.
Yeah.
And so inherently there are problems.
Yeah, and I think that part of that wear is like a vehicle. You need to maintain it, right?
Exactly.
And I think looking at this, talking to some people, that you guys need some better maintenance. I mean, there needs to be better maintenance programs in place.
Yep.
There needs to be better training programs in place.
Yep.
That's, I think, where it's at, and what the focus should be is
Right.
like, how can we help you?
Right.
Not take away more.
You know what's frustrating?
What can we give you?
What's frustrating for us in law enforcement is,
Dude, look, I see what you. I had a taste.
Yep.
My daughter.
Yep.
I was at my daughter's
Yep.
crash site. I didn't.
Yep.
I drove up to it not knowing.
Yep.
Y'all were trying to get her out.
Yep.
Still, she was still alive.
Yep.
All those things. I better not keep talking about it because I'm gonna lose it.
I know.
But and I saw that crash 10 years
Yep.
ago.
Yep.
Where 5 people died. My grandson's 2.5 years old.
Yep.
I found Carter.
Yep.
I did.
Yep. Yep.
I see what you see
Yeah.
a couple times in my entire life,
And these guys see it multiple times.
all the time.
Yeah.
You guys need better maintenance. And I don't say that as a negative to
No,
you.
no.
I'm saying that there should be more support.
It's now fortunate. The one thing that with all the events that have taken place, certainly probably since Ferguson, is law enforcement taking a step back and saying, how can we better take care of our people?
Yeah.
because it's just recently within the last 10 years or so that we're now really seeing the cumulative stress and how it really takes a toll.
And that cumulative stress is happening because there's cumulative negative prosecution. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's statistically shown.
Yep.
You're letting the bad guys back out, which has nothing to do with you.
And it's frustrating for our guys.
Absolutely, it is. So
they see that court disposition, and they're like, "Well, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why did I spend all that time on that case if that's what you're going to do?"
Yes.
But we really work to train our guys that all we can do is the best that we can. We need to do the best that we can do on our end.
Yep.
And we turn it over, and you got to let it go.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, but mental health is
for sure
is a struggle, and so one of the frustrating things for our guys is when you get into a political climate like you have now, and everybody's jumping on this narrative, this negative negative law enforcement narrative, and you get people at the state saying, "Well, we're gonna ban chokeholds. We're going to require." Implicit bias training. We're going to require mental health training. We're going to require critical incident training. We're going to require there's 2 or 3 other ones that we were talking about the other day. It's like they talk about this at the state level that it's all this feel good politics. We're going to make them do all this stuff. We're already doing it.
Yeah.
We do everything right now in Dodge County, and most of the agencies in southeast Minnesota are already doing it.
You are doing it, and I saw that. I was in a school, and I did my presentation, and after the presentation, I allow the students to come up and say hi or whatever, and I have a banner to sign and some of that stuff. And so this one student, you could see her. She was waiting till the end, senior in high school. And she waited to the end. She came up here and she handed me a note. And it was a suicide note. I had the opportunity to walk her down to the counselor's office and guess who was there? The liaison officer.
Right, the SRO. Yep.
And they talked to her.
Yep.
I got to sit there and witness that.
Yep.
The mental health aspect of it. You guys are dealing with that all the time.
Especially
and
now
thank
with
you for
COVID.
saying that.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that people don't see ever.
Yep.
Is you're helping people through a lot of mental health crisis.
Yep.
A 18-year-old student in school that came up and handed me a suicide note, and you guys have to
What's the
do
number
that
they use
all
now?
the time.
They're using I've just heard a recent statistic that they were using where the average American goes through 2 or 3 major crisis events in their lifetime.
Sure.
The average cop deals with over 800 major crises during their career. And then they have to go home and be dad or mom.
Yeah.
Or son or whatever.
Yeah.
All
the while the public is demanding more and more and more.
Absolutely.
And more pressure instead of helping alleviate that pressure.
Right. And when you talk about school resource officers, that's another example of where a narrative can go so south so quickly when this anti-law enforcement narrative has gone to Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Seattle. I forget which other major metros have pulled their school resource officers from their schools.
Well, I was golfing with a buddy of mine, and a guy said, "Hey, you mind if I join you?" We were on 6th, 7th hole or something like that, and he said, "I just want to get in a few." It was just the 2 of us. There was nobody else on the. I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." He ended up being an SRO, and he was worried about that same thing.
Absolutely.
And he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
I love these kids.
Right.
I've been working with them forever. I know a couple other ones that are concerned.
Right.
And what is most concerning is not what happens today and tomorrow for me. It's what happens in 5 or 10 years from now.
Right.
If you do that.
Right. Right. Well, and if you look at it, and you're exactly right, and I'll give you an example. 2 weeks ago, it's been about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got an email from a gentleman in our county. So our school resource officer through the county is Dave Skadson. He's the SRO that works both the Triton School and the Hayfield School District. Sure. And I got an email from this gentleman, like I said, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said, my daughter's having her birthday. It's coming up this Saturday. She turns 6. Her name is Ava. And it's COVID, and I asked, who would you like to have come to your birthday party? And one of the first people she mentioned was Deputy Dave. Mm-hmm. She asked if Deputy Dave could come to her birthday party. And this is a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And so he contacted me. Well, I got a hold of Dave, and Dave's like, absolutely, I'll go. He went on his own time, brought her a bunch of swag, from the office, and had his picture taken with her, and went to her birthday party on a Saturday on his own time. What kind of impression do you think that made on her?
Absolutely.
And on her friends.
Yeah.
And on their parents. And on her parents. And where is she going to be from a respect level down the road? Or who's she going to go to if she needs help? Who's she going to go to if she needs somebody that she can trust to talk about something? Mm-hmm. She's going to go to Dave. Yeah.